Yes, sir,
Hello.
we can.
Okay. It gives us immense pleasure to welcome Mr. Srilan Mithapala, the past president of Tourist Hotels Association of Sri Lanka, Director Labs Leisure and International Board member of Asian Ecotourism Network. Sir has over 30 years of wide experience in the hospitality industry. His last few years in the private sector was as CEO of Serenjeev Leisure Management. For his efforts, he was awarded the Green Jobs Award in 2008 by the government of Sri Lanka. Sir also has a considerable exposure in the international hospitality arena, participating and presenting papers in many international symposiums, workshops, and travel fairs. He was the president of Tourist Hotels Association of Sri Lanka and led the very successful EU-funded Switch Asia Greening Sri Lanka Hotels project administered by the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. Currently, he is engaged in various consultancy assignments in sustainable tourism development, environment, and wildlife. He has been the keynote speaker at several ecotourism and sustainable tourism forums. Now, I would like to request Sir to please proceed with the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome everyone to this presentation on animals in tourism and cruelty. I'm thankful to the Institute of Travel and Tourism of the Amity University of Kolkata, and in particular to Professor Siddharth and Professor Vandita. She is the one who originally um, reached out and contacted me, and I was very happy to readily agree to this because of my interest in wildlife and nature plus tourism. So I readily agreed to participate and talk to you. I'm going to talk about 50% of academic stuff and 50% wildlife field work, because I think there is a large audience of academics also involved. So my presentation will cover why tourism, why animals in tourism. First of all, why do we use animals? Why there is cruelty? And what type of animal cruelty is prevalent? And then we'll talk a little bit about animal rights and ethics, and then look at how we can use animals in a responsible manner in tourism. So why animals in tourism? A tourist generally seeks to explore. He wants to see something that he has not seen before. He's always trying to look at new things. So that's why he travels, to see something that he normally cannot see in his own environment. At the same time, people have always been fascinated by animals. There's almost everyone certainly likes animals in some way or the other, in the wild or captivity. So therefore, obviously, tourism and the love for animals will go hand in hand, and there is a demand for animals to be used in tourism. So this has led to wildlife tourism. It is in the proper sense, people going out to another place to view wildlife in order to experience wildlife.
Hello, Arvindji.
I think, sir, network is problem
This
maybe.
is an issue. No? Can you please just contact him once?
Hello.
Is Arvindji? Can you just
Yeah,
contact him once and tell him that he is not in his.
sir, his internet is not working. So who is coordinating with them, sir? I
We are
think you
only.
have a
Yes, we have. I think one number was also
Yes,
shared.
sir. I will just
Yeah.
contact him.
Please.
Participants, I would request you to kindly bear with us. The guest will be back with us in a few seconds.
Dear participants, please be with us. There's a technical issue from the speaker side. We'll be back very soon. Please bear with us for some time, for a few minutes. Thank you. I think sir has already joined. Yes, he has joined. Yes, sir.
My
You have...
apologies.
No,
My
it's fine, sir.
Yeah.
It's fine, sir. It was a technical issue. It's fine, sir. No issues. You can please continue.
You have to enable me to share again.
Sir, it's already done, sir. Just share it, sir.
Okay.
But in the first slide.
Right. So we were talking about wildlife tourism, which is in sense how tourism people come to the another country to see wildlife, both when it's in the wild or in the natural settings. It's interesting to know that about 7% of the world tourism is related to wildlife, and it's growing at about 3% apparently. And tourism, as you know, contributes about 10 to 10.5% to the GDP, while wildlife tourism amounts to about 4% of this component. So that's a large component of wildlife tourism. Wildlife tourism can be active and passive. Active is where you get involved with wildlife. You do wildlife collecting or specimen collecting. You can do hunting. We'll talk about that a little later. But the more prevalent wildlife tourism is passive tourism, passive wildlife tourism, which is watching wildlife, photography, interacting with animals, etc. So why cruelty to animals? Now, you know, tourism attractions have a finite life cycle. People get tired of seeing the same thing over and over again. So when the novelty wears off, tourists demand to see something different. Like you go to a wildlife park, you want to see something different. You want to get closer to an animal. So obviously the providers start trying to push the boundaries and make animals behave or interact with them in a cruel manner so that you make the tourist happy. However, the research shows that many tourists are unaware of this thing because they only see the glossy stuff and they see the nice advertisements about these things. So many tourists apparently are not aware that they are actually going and seeing an attraction which behind the scenes is causing a lot of cruelty to animals. So this is something that we have to keep in mind. And what type of cruelty to animals is there in tourism? If you look at it from an overall point of view, in the captive animals, it's overloading and overworking for tourism, stressful, unnatural performances for tourism. Sometimes animals are drugged to make them accessible for closer interactions. Sometimes in the wild, animals are enticed to come closer to humans, so that also is interfering with the animal's behavior, and some animals are bred for exhibition and entertainment only. So there are some key stimulants, as I see, some things that motivate these aspects, and that is particularly charismatic animals. Firstly, always people like to see charismatic animals like the elephant, the tiger, lion, leopard. So always there's a push to use these animals even in the wild or in captivity for use in tourism. Humanoid animals like apes also have a big demand because they look like us, and so it's very interesting to have a look at them. And similarly, people like to get close to animals which are a bit feared, like snakes and sharks. If they can get close to them, there is some sort of a thrill. So the types of cruelty to animals in tourism, let's look at some examples, a few examples. There are many, but because of time constraints, we'll talk about the first thing is the most prevalent, most common thing, elephant rides. Now, as you know, I have done some work with elephants. I have done some research, and I know a little bit about elephants. Now, elephant spine is the ridge protrudes on the back. So when you have about 6 people sitting on an iron frame like this, which is placed on the elephant's back, that hurts the elephant's spine pretty badly. And he can have long-term problems where his spine can be damaged. And this is a very cruel form of entertainment for tourists, where about 6 or 4, minimum 4 to 6 people sit on one elephant's back, and it's very, very painful, and it is detrimental to the elephant's long-term health. Secondly, many times this is driven by demand. That means whenever a tourist comes, the elephant is taken out for a walk. So it can be even at 12 noon. The poor elephant has to walk on a tarmac road, and this is what his feet look like sometimes, blistered. So this is the very bad form of animal cruelty in tourism. But thankfully, in many countries, tourists have become aware that this is bad, and there is a demand to stop it. In Sri Lanka, by and large, this has been reduced to a great extent. Performance with animals like elephants in the zoo. This is in the Sri Lankan zoo. Very nice to watch, but however, it's obvious that the elephant does not behave or move his limbs like this in nature. So he's forced to do this. Sometimes to train them, they go through a very, very strict disciplinary process. Sometimes very cruel means are used to train them for this type of work, this type of entertainment. So this is another form of animal cruelty that we see for performing animals. Similarly, you find dolphins and orcas being used in ocean parks, being brought to land like this. You can see dolphins don't behave like this. People think that the dolphin is very happy because the dolphin's anatomy looks as if he's smiling, but he's not smiling. That is the way he looks. And they get the animals to do these type of unnatural things, which is forced. It is obvious that they are under a lot of stress. Sometimes animals are bred purposely for entertainment purpose only. In Thailand and in some of the Asian countries, you find crocodile farms. They perform for the tourists, meat is put and they jump around. And after their life cycle, their use is done. They are destroyed and their skins used for handbags and things like that. So this is also, as I explained, a very irresponsible way of using animals. I explained that people like to get close to charismatic animals. Where on earth would you be able to get close to a tiger like this? This tiger is drugged, and you get a beautiful photograph like this and you take it back and you're very happy. But the tiger has undergone enormous behavioral changes. He is constantly drugged to be in this state. Turtles being released to the sea. Now, this is a classic example of where in the name of conservation, we are causing a lot of damage. If you understand, these turtles come ashore once or twice a year and they lay eggs on the beach. At a particular time, the eggs hatch and the hatchlings start moving towards the sea. They are inbuilt. They have a certain sense of the magnetic field of the earth, and that's how they find their way to back to the sea. Now, yes, when they start moving like this, there are predators like crows and seagulls, and some of the hatchlings do get destroyed. But that is nature. the nature will balance things. They will catch the weak hatchlings and the stronger ones will get to the sea. So that is nature. But here, in the name of tourism, what we do is we interfere with nature. We go and dig up these eggs, take them to a hatchery and let the small hatchlings live there for a couple of days. And then when the tourists come, you pay $5 or $10 per hatchling and you send the hatchlings into the sea. And here again, just like the elephant rides, it's at the demand of the tourist and not at nature's call when the hatchlings are ready to go. So you can imagine what a lot of stress, what a lot of trauma is being undergone by these hatchlings. And many of them, even though the tourists are thrilled to think that they are doing something great for conservation, they have all gone into the whether they have really succeed to live is questionable seriously. Encouraging wild animals in the wild, I explained that this is a famous elephant called Gamunu in the famous Yala Wildlife Park of Sri Lanka. He has been fed from small days and he has got used to it now. He's a strapping bull elephant with tusks, and he comes and gets asked for food from the jeeps. In fact, some of the jeep drivers take some food along and entice the animal to come close, because when the animal comes close, the tourists all get excited. They are thrilled, they are frightened, but that gives them a certain extra thrill and they get a better tip. So this is something that has been prevalent in most parts of Asia, where animals, wild animals, are enticed. So this has disrupted the animal's behavior. He's no longer 100% wild animal. He has got acclimatized, and he's obviously going to have a lot of problems in managing his affairs. I talked about humanoid animals, apes. In hotels in the past days, we used to have monkeys performing like this, dressed like humans. It looks so cute, but it's very, very inhuman, because the apes are undergoing a lot of stress. They have been beaten to do these type of tricks. So this, thankfully, again, is on the way out. I don't think in any parts of Sri Lanka, in the hotels in particular, they don't use these type of animals anymore to showcase. And touching dangerous animals, I said, bringing snakes in and getting a selfie or a photograph like this. This is, again, you might think it's a snake, but still the snake is undergoing a lot of stress because he's being put through these sort of unusual situations. So these are all aspects of bad practices. And finally, overcrowding in parks. Very often in our parks, when you see an animal, a charismatic animal, a telephone call goes around and the jeeps all come and hem the animal. Now here, this is I think in Kenya, you can see the cheetah, you can see his body language, he's all tensed up. So you are disrupting the animal's normal behavior. So this is not responsible tourism. Responsible tourism is watching and looking at animals in their natural habitat without disturbing them. And this animal's behavior, his interactions with other animals, all will be disrupted because of these stress levels. So the fundamental rule here is that when we go to a park, when a tourist goes to a park, even we should remember that we are the residents. That park has been allocated only for wildlife. And we are the trespassers. We don't own the park. The animals have the right of way. So this is something we forget in our life when we talk about animals and tourism. Let's go to animal rights and ethics. Here we can talk about something called anthropocentrism. Anthropocentrism, in the simplest word, is man assuming the role that he is the be-all and the end-all on earth. He is the chief reason for everything to live. He is the primary species, and therefore he has jurisdiction over everything else that lives. That is anthropocentrism in the simplest sense. So if you look at it in a wider sense, perhaps anthropocentrism is the cause of all these problems we are having today of pollution, climate change, habitat loss, species. So this is where anthropocentrism is prevalent. And from that, from tourism, it comes conservation sport hunting. This is why I said about hunting. Now, this is an interesting situation where in some African countries where there is a reasonably high population of animals, lions, elephants, they auction out a permit so that people can buy this permit to come and kill this animal, hunt this animal and kill it. So these permits go at a very high price of about $250,000. And it's a pseudo hunt, obviously, and it's carefully managed, supposed to be scientifically managed. And you get a good photo opportunity like this. And even the IUCN, the International Organization for the Conservation of Nature, has said that this is a reasonably good idea, because it is said that all this money goes back for conservation. So I don't know, the jury is out on this. There are a lot of ethical issues here, whether man can really take the decision to destroy another animal. Are we playing God? That's the bottom line. So when you look at ethics, when I started looking through the research for this, when I was doing this presentation, I found that there's enough and more of ethics and guidelines from tourism about sustainability. It covers everything from environment to socio-cultural impacts, economic impacts. But what is missing from this narrative is the fact of is reference to animals. It never anywhere does it mention about cruelty and looking after animals properly in tourism. So that's a big shortcoming that we have. We talk a lot about general stuff about sustainability, but there's very little specific to animals. Of course, in the private sector, there are people who have developed captive animal freedoms, 5 freedoms for captive animals: freedom from hunger, freedom from discomfort, freedom from pain and injury and disease, freedom to express normal behavior, and freedom from fear and distress. If you just look back to some of those examples I told you, you will find that at least 2 to 3 of these freedoms are not prevalent in those. So it's obvious that people don't follow these things. The Association of British Travel Agents have put out a fairly good set of guidelines for these type of activities for tourism. It is it's a useful guideline. And of course, your own Mahatma Ji spoke about the greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way its animals are treated. So that's a great saying, not only for tourism, but for an entire nation. In Buddhism, it is taught that animals and humans share the same essential nature. We are not a separate class of beings, we are all similar. The highest virtue of Buddhism is compassion, and compassionate to be compassionate to animals. And Arahat Mahinda, who came from India bringing Buddhism to Sri Lanka, when he came in to Sri Lanka, he found King Devanam Piyatissa hunting. And he stopped the king and said, "Oh great king, the birds of the air and the beasts have an equal right to live and move about in any part of this land as thou. This land belongs to the peoples and all other beings, and thou art only the guardian of it." So Buddhist teachings are completely in line with preventing cruelty in animals. Similarly, in Hinduism, it teaches that God resides in all living things. It's a form of Atman. And in fact, in Hinduism, many animals are venerated. So there is a paradox here. It is said that animals in Asia are among the most abused in the world. So how come? We have all these lovely religious beliefs, but perhaps it is because of less affluence and poverty. People try to use the animals to get some more money, a lack of awareness, religious and cultural dogmas perhaps, and inadequate laws in our parts of the country. However, sorry, before that, so there's a double paradox here. When you look at West and Asia, exotic flora, fauna, biodiversity is very low in West because it's not a tropical country. You have different climates. In Asia, it's tropics, and we have a very high biodiversity in our parts of the world. Religious beliefs, as I explained to you, in the West, yes, Christianity and things have some mention about animals, but in our religions, animals are held in great esteem. However, when you come to animal rights, Asia is very low, West is very high. And cruelty to animals, Asia is very high, West is very low. So it's a double paradox as I looked at it. But having said that, I found a wonderful judgment from the Uttarakhand High Court about 2 years ago, where the High Court decreed that animals have the same rights and duties of a living person. It's a wonderful judgment. And I think India has not made sufficient use of this. I don't think there's enough traction, enough publicity given to this. This is a wonderful thing from our parts of the world where we are generally seen that animals are not taken care of that well. So now let's look at responsible tourism with animals, the last part of the presentation. This depends on both sides, the animals, the tourists and the tourism service providers. It takes two hands to clap. So both sides are responsible for this bad behavior, bad practices, the tourists and the tourism service providers. Mass tourism, as you know, is a necessary evil in tourism, where large numbers of people come. They are more interested in looking at things quickly, seeing as many things as possible, getting discounts, souvenir collecting, tick the boxes, very superficial. So that type of tourist is prevalent. But however, the ecotourism has come up, which is quite the opposite. It's small groups of people who want to learn, experience, appreciate, and understand what they are seeing. So it's more, these people are more into emotional consumption than materialistic consumption. So obviously, when you have people with more emotional consumption, they will be more concerned about using animals and how they are watching animals and getting that proper experience. Some years ago, my colleague, my friend, Professor Chandi Jayawardena from Canada and I postulated, and we produced this model of the evolving tourist expectation model. What we worked on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where we said the initial first visit of a tourist, he's the first time he's going out, he look for cheap prices, he will look for quick deals, he wants to see as many things as possible, he's not interested in understanding what he sees, he just wants to tick the boxes. So that's at the first level. As he goes on his second and third visits, he becomes much more realizing that he wants a better room, he wants to see better things, and his awareness of environment increases. So just like in the hierarchy of needs, the tourist also proceeds up this ladder and becomes much more interested, much more aware, much more desiring of a better experience. So this is what we said, that they go from a low concern for environment to a high concern for environment. And the important thing is that as you go up like this, the higher end tourist will pay a much higher price for a more authentic, responsible experience than the initial mass tourism, the sort of materialistic tourist at this end, and the more emotional consumption tourist at this end. To look at sustainable tourism development, there are a lot of definitions out there, but I like to look at it in a simpler form. It is basically a balance between the tourism business, conservation, and environment, and the local involvement. So it's basically doing your business properly, seeing that environment is protected, and at the same time seeing that something goes back to the people and empower the people. So it's a balance. It never says, this is something that people make a big mistake when you talk about sustainability. It does not mean that you should give importance to one over the other. If all three must develop together. So sometimes my own colleagues who are environmentalists, they talk about you must stop tourism, you must prevent development. No, sustainability never talks about that. It says, do your development, do your business, but at the same time, see that there is a balance, that you don't damage the environment, you make a compromise, and you look at poverty elevation and empowerment of the local community. So having looked at those 3-4 concepts, let's look at responsible practices with tourism, a more practical approach. You must ensure that there's no disturbance to wildlife, experience rather than consume, interact responsibly, say no to bad practices, don't go to hotels or other entertainment venues which show these type of bad practiced animals be in captivity, animals as photography props, and humanized behavior, and culture and religion is not an excuse for cruelty. Now, on that point, I would like to talk quickly about the Kandy Perahera, Sri Lanka's famous pageant. It's a religious pageant which has a long cultural history, where you have about 60-70 elephants parading the streets every August for about 3 or 4 days. However, some of these elephants are badly treated. They are chained very tightly, and they are cruelly used, because sometimes these elephants can get very stressed. There's a lot of fire, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of drums. So this is something that is very controversial. It is steeped in a lot of religious cultural background. So there is a lot of controversy out there whether some of these practices have to be reviewed and done in a more responsible manner. For tourist operators who are using, who are taking tourists to wildlife parks, properly brief the tourists. Do not raise expectation levels. Do not overpromise. That's what happens very often. You promise them that you'll see a tiger or a leopard or a elephant, and when you don't see that animal, the tourist is disappointed, and then he goes on asking you, and then the provider pushes the boundaries to somehow entice an animal or go off road and look for this animal. It's the overall experience what counts, not a good sighting. So emphasize to tourists that it's the wider biodiversity that is important. I believe sorting this problem out, about 75% or 80% is in our hands, tourism operators and tourists, because it's basically, the way I look at it, it is a supply and demand problem. On the one hand, you have the service providers who do these safaris, or you show people in the wild, animals in the wild, or have captive animals. They are pushing new things, as I said, novelty, changing things, pushing the animals' boundaries to do various unnatural things, because on the other hand, the tourist is pulling. He's asking for this type of thing. He's wanting new things. The novelty is wearing off. So there's a demand. So as long as the demand is there, these type of irresponsible supply will continue. Now, if we can say, no, we are not going to accept these type of practices. If we say we won't come and go for these elephant rides, we'll go for responsible ethical practices, then I think we can be quite sure that this type of cruelty can be reduced to a great extent without without resorting to all these laws and ethics and guidelines. Self-regulation like this is the best. So lastly, let's look at some examples to finish up the practical aspects. Meaningful interactions. Now in Asia, you know, we have a lot of captive elephants. We have human-elephant conflict where we get elephants dying. In Sri Lanka last year, we had 400 elephants dying in the wild. That's more than one a day. And very often elephants are orphaned. So these elephants have to be looked after by the private sector or the government. So if there is bound to be captive elephants. So why can't we use the elephants like this to perhaps give the tourist an experience to stay with the elephant for the whole day, see how it's eating, see how he goes to bathe. Perhaps they can join and help bathe the elephant. So this is a very meaningful interaction with tourism, with elephants. And again, remember, this type of tourist who wants this experience will pay much top dollar than just going on an elephant ride. This is in Min area. the famous, world famous gathering of elephants, 400 elephants during a particular period in August, September, you can see. And we had a huge problem with overcrowding, where the elephants come. On the right-hand side is the jungle, and on the left-hand side is the reservoir. And every evening the elephants go to water. Now this going to water is very important because they are hot and they need to get to the water. Now those days the jeeps will be going all over off-road and disrupting their natural behavior, again cruelty. But with some training and with some awareness created to these service providers, you can see how it has worked now. They have all lined up and opened up a corridor for the elephants to go to the water. Yes, there is still crowding, but however, there is discipline. So this is again sustainability, managing the situation so that, I mean, the easiest thing would be say, no tourists to see this gathering. It's such an important, such a unique event. No way. The gathering brings something like 6 billion rupees to tourism every year. It's one of the world famous. Lonely Planet has listed it as the 6th world wildlife wonder in the world. So you have to manage this. So this is what sustainability is all about. Elephant riding, as I said, you're always going to have a few elephants in captivity. You can see in this case the elephant's ridge, the spine. The elephant's head, as you know, is very, very big, and the neck muscles, therefore, are very strong. It can easily carry a man or a full-grown adult or two on its back. So, if there is a die-hard tourist who really wants to pay top dollar and ride an elephant, and you have a captive elephant, a healthy elephant who's well looked after, so why not? Why not teach the tourist to get on the neck and go for a short ride? So this is another way of balancing this. However, it must be done bareback, because the elephants, and it's not easy to sit on this on the neck, because the elephant's hair is very thick and very strong, and very often you will get pricked in the most delicate places when you travel like this. Again, as I said, you have captive elephants. Most of my examples are elephants, obviously, because I have done a lot of work with elephants during my life. You can use captive elephants to educate children. This is one way of conserving and helping the future generations of animals, because the future is in the hands of our young children. So if a child can interact like this and learn about the elephant, what is conservation, why is this animal so important to us, it's a wonderful situation. Again, tourism can play a big role in education. Zoos, a lot of tourists go to zoos, but zoos have to move from being exhibits and attractions to centers of conservation, education, and research. They have to move away from these bars. They have to be open zoos, where open range zoos, where the animals are left in a more open environment. And I have interacted with Victoria zoos and done some lectures there. They changed from being a zoo to a conservation organization. So the Victoria zoos are no longer zoos, they are conservation organizations. So once they do this, you can see a huge shift there. This is Rambo, elephant in Udawalawe National Park. He has got used to being fed by people, and he comes to this bund. The reservoir is on this side, but he has become a huge icon for tourism. He comes here just to get some tidbits like bananas and watermelons from people. And he's a very docile animal. And if this can be managed, now again, this is I'm talking about sustainability. There's nothing cruel happening here, but we have gone and disturbed this animal's behavior. He has got used to coming here to get these tidbits from people. As long as we can manage it, can't we use this for tourism? Can't we use it as an icon for tourism? He's probably the most photographed elephant for tourism in Sri Lanka, because it's the most easiest thing to go up there and take a photograph of it. Last two examples, Rwanda gorilla trekking. This is a very, very wonderful classic example. In the Virunga Mountains, there are about, I think, 600 to 700 gorillas in about 10 troops. Now this trekking is under strict control. You go to base camp, you pay top dollar, you pay about $1,000 to $1,500 per person for this experience. So you go there and stay, not more than 10 people are taken at a time. The rangers go out at 5 o'clock in the morning. They go up and scout around and see where the troops are, and then they radio back and say, right, you can come up now. And then the people are taken in 10 under very controlled conditions with rangers right around you. You get the most wonderful experience of interacting with these beautiful animals. And the interesting thing is 15% of the revenue earned goes back to the community. All these rangers are from that community. They have been taught. So this is a wonderful example of sustainable tourism development, where you are using these animals, but still at the same time developing the business. Lastly, from my own country, Jetwing Villuyana is a boutique hotel, a very exclusive boutique hotel, very much into environment in the central province of Sri Lanka. The story is that just after the war, when tourism was booming, the hotel was doing very well. Demand was very high for rooms, and they decided to build 6 more rooms in a jungle patch by the side of the hotel. Now, the hotel has naturalists, and they, as I told you, they are very much into nature. So these guys had noticed that there was this unusual small animal called the loris, a fairly rare nocturnal animal in this jungle patch, 1 or 2. And they said they felt that if we cut the jungle patch, these animals will die. So they took this up to the management, and the management took it up to the chairman. Now, if you look at it, 6 rooms coming in, you have the infrastructure, it's just profit on the bottom line, right? But this company took this up and said, if this is that important, we will not do this development, but we will buy some land adjacent and do these additional rooms in another location and leave this for the animals. Now, this is a classic, beautiful example of how people are thinking about the environment, but at the same time doing the business. But the bottom line, the icing on the cake is today, that little patch of forest is, I think, home to about 20 to 25 animals. Families are there now. They do night safaris, again, very controlled. And today, this has become a world-renowned conservation center for loris. So you can see how this small initiative, or not a small initiative, actually, from the company's point of view, is a big initiative, right? To say, okay, we will not do this development, but how they have used this. And today, Jetwing is well known the world over for this slender loris conservation. So that brings me to the end of my talk. These are the references I used. I think I am right on time. I said 40 to 45 minutes. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. I hope it was interesting. I know there are so many other examples that we can take. You can always interact with me offline. My contacts are there, but I think, Professor Siddharth, I think we have some time for questions and answers. Am I right?
Yes, sir. It was a very interesting session, sir, and it was an eye-opener for me as well. Many aspects you have touched, which is really crucial for the society to live together.
Thank you.
And so participants are equally excited. Now I request Professor Vandita to please start coordinating the question and answer session.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Sure, sir. Sir, thank you so much. It was a phenomenal presentation, first of all. And sir, we shall take the first question. This comes from one of our students.
Yes.
So the question is that nowadays there are many organizations, actually many big shots like that of Thomas Cook, who have actually removed all these features of elephant rides from their itineraries.
Yes.
We hear about observation only attractions like the Phuket Elephant Sanctuary, Save the Elephant Foundation, Happy
Yes.
Elephant Valley, etc. nowadays. However, many such self-proclaimed elephant sanctuaries are nothing more than glorified circuses. So, sir, what do you think can be done with regard to this from the point of tourism?
Yes, that's a very good question, because even in Sri Lanka, it's the same thing. Most of these people, as I said, the demand side has pushed, and therefore there is a very uh, controlled activity. However, some of these things, like I showed you, the turtle hatcheries, right? They advertise saying it's a turtle conservation project. So unfortunately, like your student said, there are a lot of pseudo elephant orphanages that have come up. Unfortunately, I think they are not regulated. So you have to be able to regulate it also from the government side, which is necessary. But at the same time, like Born Free, like Save the Elephants have done, if they can do audits and sort of publicize and say, look, don't go to this, we will not recommend this. And TripAdvisor is a good source where guests themselves go and give the feedback that they felt very uncomfortable seeing these things. So I think it's a combination of regulation and self regulation that has to take place to try and stop these mushroom places.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question is, does wildlife tourism need to redefine itself, keeping the animal abuse in mind?
Come again, does the
wildlife tourism need to redefine itself, keeping the animal abuse in mind?
uh I don't think it needs to redefine. It is the way it is being practiced that has to be looked at, I think, because when you look at the proper wildlife definition and responsible wildlife, it is pretty good. It says, look, you should interact with animals, but in their natural settings. Don't disturb them. Don't disturb their breeding patterns. Don't get too close to them and things like that. So it's us who go and distort this definition. So I don't think wildlife tourism per se has to redefine itself. It is the practice that has to change amongst us.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, many tourists who love animals unwittingly contribute to animal cruelty because they are not aware of the hidden animal abuses at the attractions they visit. So what can be done to change the same?
Yes, that's what I think I told you a little while ago, that there is a lack of awareness in our parts of the world. So I think a lot of training, awareness programs. Now that's what I try to do. I think I've spoken to more than 50 schools in the country. I go to all the schools and start talking. Of course, I talk about elephants predominantly, why we should conserve these animals. So it's a question of education. If you educate people and people understand these things, however poor they are, there is always a possibility that they will think twice and understand this better. So I think it's a question that tourists and even the providers both have to be educated. But having said that, most tourists today, I must say, I don't know about India, but who are coming to Sri Lanka are quite aware of these things on their own, right? They are more environment savvy. They will get upset when they see some garbage. They will get upset when an animal is being ill-treated. So I think there is a change happening. And as I said, if the change is coming from the demand side, all this can be reduced significantly.
Right, sir. On the same vein, there is another question, like how can we become a compassionate traveler? Now that's a term someone has used, a compassionate traveler, and keep animal suffering out of our itineraries.
Yes, that's a very nice term, a compassionate, responsible traveler. Again, I think there are lots of resources today, particularly in the West, that when a tourist leaves its country and going particularly to Asia, there are checklists that person can see what to check, what to be careful of. Look, when they advertise like this, that means there is something going on behind the scenes for animal cruelty, like that, So it's again a question of you being aware, you being understanding what is happening. Now, for example, the example I took about turtle conservation. Now that is, I mean, people think they are doing a great thing. They go happy because they said we have saved so many turtles, but you're not saving them. So this is the question. You have to dig deep and see what is happening. So very few people know that those little turtles have an inbuilt mechanism. It's nature taking its course. You must allow the nature to take its course. You can't keep them and send them off into the sea when you want. So these are things. So to be a compassionate traveler, you have to be an educated traveler for wildlife. You understand at least a little bit of what you're going. And if you're embarking on a journey, you can then do a little research. Today, you can find enough from the internet, right?
Right, sir. Sir, there are other questions also. I think most of it has been already addressed by you in your presentation.
Okay.
Like how can travelers interact with animals ethically, or what could be some of the cruelty-free ethical wildlife tourism experiences?
Yeah, I think I explained some of them towards the end of my talk. There are so many like that. Lots of good companies are doing this. Again, remember that what I'm very keen for, particularly your students to remember, is this sustainability. Because I'm an environmentalist, but I find most of my environmentalist friends don't understand sustainability. Sustainability does not mean not doing any business because of environment issues, right? So this is all a question of balancing it. Like I said, I would love to see a world without captive elephants, without captive animals, but that's never going to happen, particularly in elephants, right? So if you're going to have captive elephants, treat them well, look at it, and see how you can manage it. So that is where I think how people can help is by forcing. Again, I believe self-regulation. If you can force these operators, these people to behave responsibly, this will work.
So we have another question from one of our participants. Do you think stricter punishments and penalties are needed for wildlife abuse, especially when it comes to hunting and killing for fun?
Yes, definitely. I believe it's a carrot and stick approach. You must incentivize and you must punish. Definitely, you must punish very severely. Now, Sri Lanka, I think, has started a little bit like this for killing elephants. In Sri Lanka, it's against the law to kill an elephant. So things like that, yes, you must do it, but at the same time, you must reward people who do good practices. Now I showed you, we have trained some of these jeep drivers who are behaving very badly before in the wildlife parks. Now we have very punitive measures. If they are caught doing something wrong, they are suspended for 2 weeks. Now we are looking at ways of rewarding them, right? Can't we say he's the best jeep driver for the month and give him a rosette to put on his windscreen so that everyone knows he has been the best driver from the feedback we got. So things like that. So it's a carrot and stick. You have to punish, yes. The government has to have very strong laws, and that's up to the government. But from the tourism aspect, we can also look at rewarding people who do good business and taking and helping them develop that business.
Right, sir. Sir, we will take another question. Someone is asking that if the practices like banning of animals for the selfies, as you said, then the performances and all that, if we ban them, how much is it going to affect the tourism economy? And what are the other options to boost up the economy, especially in Asia?
Yeah, okay. So I don't think, I'm not quite sure how much the value of this type of component is. Perhaps in some countries it might be large, these photographs and getting close to animals, what sort of income that brings. But I think, as I showed you in that our model also, our theoretical model of similar to Maslow's hierarchy, and it's obvious that when a tourist is more interested in authenticity and environment and he's more responsible, he's willing to pay more. So that offsets the other aspects. That's what I'm trying to say. So I don't think the revenue side is that much of a incentive, right? If you can show these providers, look, you have an elephant, don't ride it, but can you say package it to say, come and stay with an elephant and experience his life for the day. and charge a higher amount so that the tourist comes, he goes with the elephant to the water, he feeds it, he bathes it, he sees how the elephant is works in the day. So you know what I mean? So you can change the offering. And again, I always reminding, when you move from materialistic consumption to more emotional consumption, guests will pay much more because they are searching for this type of thing.
Thank you, sir. We shall take the last question for the day. One
Okay.
of our students is asking, could you tell us about the Pinavala Elephant Orphanage in Sri Lanka and the responsible tourism practices in Sri Lanka?
Okay. Pinavala is a bit of a controversial issue. I was the advisor to Pinavala for a little while for the government. There are some good things happening. There are some bad things happening. Yes, it's an orphanage. It was set up to look after orphans because we have a lot of orphans because of the human-elephant conflict, as I told you. But I also was one of the biggest opponents of Pinavala when the minister appointed me as the advisor, and I had no way of saying no. So when I started going there, I saw the other side of the story. Now you find that the orphanage was designed for 30 elephants. Now it has 85 elephants, huge elephants. It was an orphanage. Now it's not an orphanage. There is a grandmother there. There's a grandmother, there's a mother, and there's a daughter. So, you know, this whole concept has changed. The government has to move in and sort this out, right? So how do you expect those poor mahouts to sort this out, right? You have 85 elephants, and it's like to control 85 elephants is no joke, right? When it has been designed to control 30 small fellows, right? So things like that, yes. So it's a good question. We can talk about Pinavala a lot. I have done a lot of work there because I got to see it. And I believe it was not marketed properly because people see different things. They see only the chains. Yes, sometimes you have to have a chain, but if you look closely, those chains are not tied tightly. They are just a deterrent because the elephant is very intelligent, remember. So when the elephant hears that chain clanging, he knows he should not run. So I have taken photographs close and shown tourists. Look, this, can you see this chain? This is just wrapped around his neck, right? It is not like what you see in pictures where it's being tied. So yes, but there are certain bad practices. So things can be improved, but again, that is totally under the government. It's not a private sector organization. So but of course it's a wonderful place to interact with elephants. And it's a good question, but we can talk about Pinavala a whole session if there is time.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your valuable inputs. Focusing on what will be the roles and responsibilities of tour guides as well, and
Yes.
how cruelty happens to animals, knowingly or unknowingly, we all are responsible for it, and we need to really work on it. And you know, the contents, the way you're explaining, and the contents are so well crafted, so attractively designed, and so systematically designed. I'm
Okay.
really thankful for this wonderful presentation and interactive session, sir. And the questions were wonderfully answered. I hope we had more time with you, and would love to have more association with you in the future for this.
Certainly,
So,
I'm very impressed with the organization and how you got, I mean, it's very professional. And I also mutual the feelings that I would like to continue my association with Amity for future interactions as well. Thank you very much,
thank you, sir.
Thank you so
Vandita
much, sir.
and Professor Siddharth.
Thank you, sir. So on behalf
Bye-bye,
of
everyone.
and tourism department, sir, thank you so much again. Thank you, sir.